My name is Faedream, or Fae for short, and I'm a two-trick millionaire Gwen and Lillia player who use these champs to climb from bronze to diamond. I hope that by creating this guide I can help those who want to hit diamond with two cute girl champs who like to folklore. Today, in this guide, I will be talking about why I main Gwen and Lillia and why I think you should too. We are, after all, in a full clearing jungle meta rather than a ganking meta, and both these junglers are super clearers who can farm CS and get a huge lead over the enemy. So, as an overview, we'll talk about how I got into playing both champions, who counters who, Gwen and Lillia similarities and differences, their builds and typical rune pages, and ideal team comps for each and how they synergize in your champ pool together. As an aside, I just want to mention that I've already made a Season 14 Gwen Jungle Guide if you guys want to see more in-depth details of maining Gwen, so I will most likely gloss over her builds and rune pages in this video, and offer a one-size-fits-all rune page and a standard Gwen jungle build. I'll go more in depth with the Lillia rune pages and builds because I haven't made a guide for her yet, but I am planning to soon for either Split 3 or next season. Anyway, on with the show. So, why I play these two champs boils down to something very basic. It's their champ design. They're literally the only cute, feminine, pretty girls in the jungle, which makes me a little sad because my options as a female jungler are pretty limited. There is a known fact that most girls who play games refuse to play a male champ, so I am really no exception. I wish there were more feminine champ designs like Gwen and Lillia in the jungle. I'm sorely lacking in an AD champ who fits my picky criteria, but yeah, I am definitely not gonna pick up monster girls like Velvet and Briar. Their aggressive kit and character appearance just doesn't do it for me. Anyway, with that said, I'd like to point out that most of the pretty girl champ designs are located in the mid and support roles because that's where most of the league female player base is located. And as such, the champ design that I like, you can see there. The reason why I play both of them aside from champ design is that they are complementary to each other and are very similar. If you main one, you can easily pick up the other in case one or the other gets picked or banned. If you know the ins and outs of each champ, you can easily counter them as well. Despite being both designed traditionally as tank shredders, they do somewhat cover each other's weaknesses, and that's why it's good to main both. So who counters who? Well, I would say it is a skill reliant matchup because I've had plenty of games where I was Gwen and I just beat the Lillia because they made a lot of macro mistakes or micro mistakes, and in Season 14 there were a lot of newbies who picked up Lillia, and I'm like a Lillia millionaire, so I knew what those Lillias wanted to do and I made sure that they couldn't do what they wanted to do. So, if it's a first time Lillia and you're like a millionaire Gwen, you can definitely shut them down, but generally speaking, I would say Gwen is a tougher matchup for Lillia late game, but if you are Lillia, you can always make sure she falls behind and kill the Nexus mid game before she scales. Lillia should try to take all of Gwen's farm and push her out of her own jungle. For this reason, I would say Lillia is a better counter to Gwen if both junglers are at the same level of play. Like, Lillia was designed for the jungle, so naturally she has better ganks and better tempo than Gwen, since, Gwen was meant for top lane. She's a little bit slower getting around until she gets blue pet, and that's when her tempo just really ramps up. And she'll arrive to skirmishes pretty late compared to a full stacked Lillia before both jungle pets are complete, so she is more active on the map. But if you are a Gwen, I have made some videos playing against Lillias, and it is possible to beat her. She isn't as easy a matchup, but the number one tip I can give you is play for late, play safe, track her so she doesn't get fed off your laners, and all in her once she has no pran stacks up and she can't queue off a wave or a jungle camp, and she's just basically a sitting duck if she doesn't have flash up. Overall, if you're planning on maining Gwen, I would say Lillia is a good ban, but she may not be worth the ban after her incoming nerfs, and the enemy team might ban Gwen if you ban Lillia, and then you're kind of in a pickle, right? So it's good to have that Lillia champion open if you're planning to um, two-trick both of them. So what are each of their similarities? Well, they both want to scale, they have a weak early game, prone to invades, they are AP tank shredders who can also one-shot squishies if you snowball out of control, and Lillia and Gwen both have one of the best AoE spells in the game. If you are behind, you can collect shutdowns and get back in the game, since building pure damage on both really packs a punch. However, if you are super duper far behind, both are rather weak and useless, and you will just get one shot on repeat, which isn't very fun. Additionally, if you are fed, you can give away your shutdown, as both are squishy champions, with Gwen being more squishy than Lillia. They both clear super fast and can counter jungle like there's no tomorrow. Arguably, they are highly mobile, however Gwen is a little immobile until she gets a higher cooldown on her dash in the late game. You can also easily sidestep skill shots on both, with Lilia's move speed and Gwen's W and E. Generally, it's good to play for the grubs and get level 6 on both champions. The grubs give HP and gold, and trading for it is worthwhile in the early game since both champions are so weak before level 6. If too many enemies are on the grubs, go do something else, such as trade for Drake, counter jungle, or continue getting a CS lead by farming your own camps. Both champions can easily tilt their teammates with a lack of early game presence, as they generally want to farm safely before hitting their power spikes and not take risks, which can fall out of their favor. However, there are some Lillia players out there that will invade, so this is just my personal observation as a Lillia main. They both kind of suck into a heavy CC comp where people can lock them down without them being able to dish out their damage. Gwen can at least buffer CC with her Qs and has her W up, but if she is chain CC'd, she is going to die. Let's talk about their differences. Lillia is obviously faster than Gwen, and Gwen, you will need to run Ghost to make the most of a teamfight and gank. Lillia, you can also gank early and get out alive safely with her E slow and move speed. Lillia can also turret dive with a Q and flash combo to get kills on low HP targets. Gwen can't really safely turret dive until level 6. I mean, it's not impossible for Gwen pre-6. For example, if there's an easy low HP target with no summer spells and no cooldowns, then that is just easy pickings for Gwen. Lillia can hit an earlier power spike and snowball off one item. That's when she should be looking for fights, ganks, and kills. Meanwhile, Gwen needs 2 items to really do any damage and 3 items to completely dominate the game, all the while ensuring the enemy team doesn't snowball. With 3 items, Gwen can collect shutdowns. Lillia can heal off camps and rely on her move speed to get out of sticky situations. Gwen will need to waste her ghost and jump over a wall perfectly with her E-dash, which you can easily mess up if you are in a panic or you don't have much experience with. I highly recommend practicing her dashes over all the walls in Summoner's Rift in Practice Tool. Speaking of Gwen's dash, Lillia cannot dash through walls like Gwen. Thus, Gwen can go for epic steals and avoid wards for good flanks, and she can also stealth the dragon and grubs early by dashing over the pit. Gwen has better dueling than Lillia, whereas Lillia has better team fighting with her crowd control ult. Gwen relies on crowd control from her teammates to reliably land her high damage needles. However, I would say Gwen is more of the 1v9 champ than Lillia, as she can self-peel with her W, whereas Lillia is more vulnerable to all-ins and crowd control. I'd say out of the two, Lillia is the easier to learn, and if you are a beginner jungler, consider picking her up if you want to learn jungle for the first time. If you are already familiar with Lillia and want to pick up a similar AP champion in case Lillia gets picked or banned, consider picking Gwen up. She is a lot harder and more punishing due to her weaker early game, but she is far more rewarding to play with the insane amount of damage she can pull off in the late game. She's more vulnerable to invades than Lillia, but at the end of the day, she will outscale most of the champions in the game. For Lillia, her builds are more varied and you can go tank one-shot damage or Bruiser Lillia. I prefer Bruiser Lillia and tank Lillia. One-shot is a bit risky as he can die and that means he won't have a smite for your team. I'll go over tank Lillia first. So you only have 6 items in your slot, so build whatever fits your game situation here. For example, if they are AP heavy, you'll try to build towards the more AP defensive items, and if they are more AD heavy, then go towards the AD route. I generally like to build Jackshow and tank Lillia build because most teams will have mixed damage and the MR and armor from Jackshow will protect you. Tank Lillia includes Leandries, which is always a must. And then for your second item, go an AP and HP item such as Riftmaker, Rylai's, or Cosmic, depending on how you like to play Lillia. And then defensive boots. And then you build Jackshow. Unless they have like a full AP team, then just go another AP item here. Or if they have like a full AD team, of course you will go another AD item here. And then afterwards you can build a Zhonya's or a Banshee's Veil, depending on the enemy team comp. I personally prefer Zhonya's on Lillia, so I will usually build that even if they have AP, because you can stasis any of their abilities from a mage. And then you have like all sorts of tank item choices for Lillia. You have Canic, you have Abyssal Mask, you have Force of Nature for teams with heavy magic damage, and then you have Frozen Heart and Randuin's for teams with heavy AD or crit damage. You can also go Dead Man's Plate here. I don't like it on her because there's physical damage on it, and Lillia does not auto-attack much, so I usually never build it unless I need another AD tank item on top of all the ones I listed here. So for this build, on your rune page, it will look like Conqueror, Triumph, Legend Haste, Coup de Grace, Conditioning, and Overgrowth with either double AP and 1 HP shard or 1 AP and double HP shard. I usually like to go green pet, but you can also go blue pet because Lillia's movement speed is significantly lower with her tank build because her speed scales with her AP. For the one-shot damage build, you will build Leandries into Blackfire Torch, into Sorcerer Shoes, or Lucidity Boots, or Swifties, depending on team comp. If you're super far ahead, just get Sorcerer Shoes. If you're not, get Lucidity Boots, especially if they're very tanky. And then I would get Swifties if the enemy team has a lot of slows. And then I would build either Zhonya's or Banshees, and then Shadow Flame if there's no magic resistance on the enemy team, or Crypt Bloom or Void Staff. I personally prefer Crypt Bloom because it heals Lillia, and Void Staff does more AP, so if you want more AP and more magic penetration, you can go for the Void Staff, and I would only build those two if the enemy team does have magic resistance. And lastly, you want to buy Rabbit Bones to increase your AP. For this particular build, there are 2 rune pages that you can go for. You can go either Dark Harvest with Cheap Shot, Eyeball Collection, and Treasure Hunter with Cosmic Insight and Magical Footwear, or you can go Water Walking and Celerity, or Absolute Focus and Gathering Storm. For shards, I go double AP and 1 health scaling shard. And the other rune page that you can go for is the Conqueror setup, and you can go Cosmic Insight and Magical Footwear, or Water Walking and Celerity, or Absolute Focus and Gathering Storm. These are typically the rune pages that I use to go full damage, and it works like a charm. You can just one-shot squishies, but sometimes the tanks can protect them, so be warned. If you get CC'd while you're going in on an ADC, you will probably die. Bruiser Lillia is my absolute favorite build because it's a mixture of damage and survivability. If you go one-shot AP Lillia, sure, you one-shot the enemy ADC, but you will make a mistake and die so fast because you're so squishy, and then you will not be able to get that dragon or that baron, and surviving as a jungler is very important because your team needs that smite. On the other hand, if you go full tank Lillia, you survive fights, but if your entire team dies, then you can't really 1v9 because you didn't build damage, you built tank items. So that's why I prefer going Bruiser Lillia, and I think this is her best build, and I usually go at every game that I play her, and I hope you guys will find fun in it and find that it's a nice bread and butter build. So, you build neon trees to get that farming in, and then you go boots. Boots on Lillia is very important because you can chase down your prey, and you can either go plate steel caps or merc treads depending on the team, and if they're mixed damage, I would go Ionian. I've got to place it there, so I'm just gonna do a little pop-up right now. And then you go into Rylai's or Riftmaker, depending if you want to kite people out with Rylai's, or if you want to be a drain tank with the Riftmaker Omnivamp in extended team fights. And I would build Riftmaker first if there's a lot of melee on the enemy team, and Rylai's to make your ranged enemies slow down so you can catch up to them. And arguably, you could just swap out Rylai's for Cosmic Drive depending on how you like to play Lillia. Usually Rylai's is good for kiting and slowing and team utility, so I prefer Rylai's more than Cosmic Drive because I feel like Lillia doesn't really need the haste, especially as she reaches level 18. All her cooldowns are exceptionally low. And then after you build those two items, you build Zhonya's. That's an essential requirement on Lillia because her flash Q ult, or her Q flash ult, and then into Zhonya's is just a really big game changer. And last but not least, you build Crypt Bloom. I like Crypt Bloom for the heal, and you can also go Abyssal Mask if you have some AP on your team and you want to enhance their damage. And the enemy team also has very fed AP carries. It's good for the magic resistance too, because up until this point, you just really have armor or maybe some magic resistance from Merc Treads. So Abyssal Mask is a Bruiser Lillia item in my opinion because it shreds magic resistance on the enemy team. So for the Bruiser Lillia runes, I usually go her standard Conqueror page with either Conditioning and Overgrowth or Cosmic Insight and Free Boots. You'll go Conditioning and Overgrowth when your team doesn't really have a front line and they expect you to engage, so that will give you some extra tankiness. And then I like to go Cosmic Insight and Free Boots if I can, because having that free $300 in your bank will let you hit your power spike faster, and Lillia doesn't really need the move speed because she can use her prance stacks to catch up to people who have boots. And Cosmic Insight's really good because her clear speed's pretty slow until she gets the Yandri, so having that extra smite to smite a Fat Gromp or a bulky Krog or a big buff will let her accelerate her camps faster, and accelerating your camps lets her hit her power spikes faster, so that's why I enjoy those two runes. And of course, I always go double AP and 1 HP on Lillia. And my favorite jungle pet on Lillia will always be the blue pet, so I usually go the blue pet on her when I'm playing her Bruiser. This is what I usually build on Lillia. This is my default rune page and default build, so if you are kind of confused about the one-shot build path and the tanky build path, if you just build this and go these runes, you will climb and you don't have to think about what you're going to build, because I have set this up to be as simple as possible for beginners, and I hope you will try it out, see where it gets you, and hopefully you guys will climb with a standard build and rune setup. Gwen usually builds full AP damage heavy, so you can build Nashers into Sorcerer Shoes, especially if the enemy team has squishies that won't build any magic resistance. Otherwise, you will go Lucidity Boots for tanks, and then your second item will be Rift Maker, and then your third item, again, if they're not going to build any magic resistance, I would go Shadow Flame, it's cheaper, but if they are, Rabadons is always a very good item on Gwen, so if you can afford it, go Rabadons third. And for fourth, I usually like to go Zhonya's, but if it calls for it, build Banshees to negate any enemy abilities spammed your way. And then last but not least, you build Void or Crypt Bloom. And if you want just like a standard Gwen build and you don't really want to think too much about build paths, I would just build all the items on the top. That's what I usually build in 90% of my games. If you somehow make it to the very late game where you have a lot of gold to spend on Gwen and you're already full build, I would suggest selling your boots and buying a Cosmic Drive because this will add to her AP and you will be able to catch up to your enemies with Ghost and the passive from proccing your abilities on enemies. Lastly, for her rune page, I usually go Conqueror, Triumph, Alacrity, Last Stand with free footwear and Cosmic Insight with attack speed, AP scaling, and HP scaling. If you want to see more builds and more rune pages, check out my Season 14 Gwen guide. The video will be in the description, and I'll provide a pop-up in the upper right corner in this video here for you for ease of access. Oh, and I usually go blue pet on Gwen, like 100% of the time. I just go blue pet because otherwise she is so slow she can't really get around the map without it. Lastly, I'll be talking about when to draft 2 into which champions and which champions you can play both into. Both Gwen and Lillia have their strengths and weaknesses into certain champs, and they both can cover each other's weaknesses, which makes them a pretty good 2-trick champion pool for you. Lillia and Gwen are really good into bruisers, tank champs, HP stackers like Swain and Scion, to name a few, and anyone who has close range, such as Yone, Yasuo, and a handless Cassiopeia. I say handless here because a good Cassiopeia can shred any melee ranged champ, and this includes Lillia and Gwen, unfortunately, and her miasma, her grounded ability, you can't really dash, so that's bad for Gwen, and you can't move as fast as Lillia, so technically speaking, if you want a good ban for a Lillia and Gwen, just ban Cassiopeia, but her play rate's pretty low, so I hardly ever do that. And Lillia and Gwen are really good into low-ranged ADCs like Zeri, Lucian, Samira. You can easily gap close them and make their lives miserable by ganking bot lane permanently. I would wait for the Zeri dash cooldown before going in, otherwise she is slippery and she'll just go over the wall. They are also good into tank engage supports, but they both suffer into enchanter supports, especially Lulu, especially for Gwen, because Gwen wants to all in and then she gets polymorphed. Lillia, if she does her little flash ult combo, she gets polymorphed and your ult won't go off in time and you might die, so Lulu is pretty bad for both of them, especially if it's a good Lulu player and she snowballs her bot lane ahead of the jungler. They can just CC you, slow you, shield your damage, and peel for their carries. But if the enchanters are behind, they are really, really squishy, and you can kill them easily with one full stacked Q on Gwen, and you can chase them down with a combo on Lillia. Both are really good into skill shot reliant champs like mages such as Vhagar and Ziggs, and ADCs who spellcast like Smolder, or with a big skill shot ult like Misfortune. If Smolder is behind, you can just kite him out on Lillia and you can use your move speed to walk out of the Misfortune ult. For Gwen, W and E are her best tools against skill shot reliant champs, so you can press W to walk over Vhagar cage, and you can press W to block the Ziggs ult and the Misfortune ult, and you can just dash with her E to dodge skill shots. And both champs are really good into assassins too. Lillia can kite them and W sweet spot them when they all end her, and if they try to escape, she can catch up, and you can ult Zed when he ults you, and he'll fall asleep and teleport behind you. That's just like a free kill, so she's really good into Zed. And Gwen, she can predict where the assassins will be with her Q and E combo, or E and Q, depending on how you want to play it. And she can also gain resistances and turn into a tank for a short period of time when they all end her. And since both Lillia and Gwen are AP bruisers, Zanya's, it's like an assassin's nightmare, so always build it when you see an assassin on the enemy team. So I talked about Lillia and Gwen's strengths into certain champions, and now I'll talk about their weaknesses. So Lillia and Gwen are really, really bad into long-ranged ADCs. At least with Gwen, she has her mist to protect her and a dash to gap close and slow them with her 3 ults. So I usually don't have any problems with Caitlyn's and Aphelios's and Jinx's late game unless their whole team is protecting them. I actually really like playing into Caitlyn's and Jinx's because they don't expect you to walk over their traps with her mist. And Lillia, she unfortunately doesn't have the mist to protect her, and she is very vulnerable in the late game against long-ranged ADCs because she will just get bursted down in 3 autos from a Caitlyn, or get chased down from Ashe, who will like have her stacked Q and just permanently slow Lillia. And you can't really do anything, because if you try to like walk up to the Ashe, she just kites you out, and if you try to run away, you're stuck. You can't run away. She's gonna catch up to you. It's a pretty bad matchup for Lillia. So if you want to kill an ADC in the late game, unfortunately on Lillia, you will have to either burn your flash to get on top of them, because her full stacked branch stacks just doesn't do much in the late game, or you have to snipe them with E, which is unreliable, and I would tend to snipe them with E in a chaotic team fight because they can't keep track of everything on the screen, so that's your most opportune time to snipe them with it, otherwise they just sort of dodge it because it's just so obvious, it's so slow. But, generally speaking, if you farm well, you're ahead on everyone else in CS and items, you just delete everyone in the game, including long-ranged ADCs, so I would not worry about them, and I would just focus on your champion identity, which is to farm, farm, farm. You're just a farming machine. And, Lillia and Gwen, they do so much damage, so if they're dead, your team might lose in a team fight, especially if you're the jungler, because you have no smite. So I would say they are really bad into anti-carry champs with point-and-click CC, like a Malzahar and a Pantheon. At least with Gwen, you can actually use her mist to block Malzahar ult and Mordekaiser ult, and it's super fun. It's super funny because they just kind of stand outside your mist, confused on what happened, and in that confused state where they're shocked and they think their ult went off or it's a glitch, you can just kill them. It's really funny. That's why I love playing Gwen. And with Pantheon, at least Gwen can buffer his stun, but he might like block your damage after with his shield, so she's not really good into like champs with shields that can block for their team. Like Yasuo Wind Wall, Samira Wind Wall. If they're good players, they will like anticipate your third R, and the Pantheon shield, and then like Braum shield. It's pretty bad for Gwen. But yeah, anti-carry champs bad. Lastly, they are bad into champs who outscale them, such as an Asol, a Vladimir, a Smolder, a Kale, and a Kassadin who can just silence spellcasters. If you don't know who to ban, you can always ban these champs in your 2-trick journey because most of the time they assume that Gwen will be in the top lane and they think it's a free lane, so they pick like a Vladimir or a Vayne or a Kale up there and they just get to freely scale because Gwen's ganks aren't that good and she can't really put behind scaling champs in the lane. As for Lillia, I mean, like, at least there's a chance where you can just bully a Vayne top or a Vladimir top, so It's very dependent on who you struggle with, but I found my games where they went on too long, I just got outscaled by these champs and I just lost because I have a problem where I just like to farm a lot, make it to late game, and then just let Gwen do her thing, or Lillia do her thing, and just have fun with like full build Lillia and Gwen. So in this slide, I will be talking about who I usually draft into who, and to specific team comps, and I think this is a great way to climb because, as I said, Lillia and Gwen, even though they're sort of the same person, well, I guess sort of the same champion, they actually do cover each other's weaknesses. And here's the things that I discovered while I was gaining mastery points on them, and I'd like to share it with you and hopefully convert some of you into like a Lillia main or a Gwen main, and ideally both, because I really enjoy these champs and I want others to have fun with them too. So let's start off. Here are champs that are good for Lillia. I would pick her into stealth champs and auto attack blockers because Gwen suffers greatly into them. She is also really good into Warwick because she can kite him out and she has heal cut. I mention this because Gwen can't W block the Warwick ult and she can get chain CC'd this way, especially if it's unavoidable, such as him doing it out of vision over a wall and you can't react in time. But if you want to play Gwen into him, that's fine because she will outscale him, but I actually find it more fun to play Lillia into him. It's way easier and it's way more fun. So Lillia is just naturally good into stealth champs because if they go into stealth mode, you can use your red trinket or, you know, follow them around and you can just queue them. I mean, like, they go stealth so then they can't get auto attacked, but Lillia has an AoE queue, so she can just easily queue them. And these champs include like Vayne, Akali, and her Smoke Cloud, Twitch when he goes invisible, and Shaco. I would just like pick her into them because she's just really, really good into those stealth champs. And she's also really good into high mobility champions and silvery champs like LeBlanc, Zed, Akali, Sona, Seraphine, Katarina, Aurora, to name a few. Gwen will have to burn her ghost to gap close champs like that, and it's better not to chase as Gwen because she can get stuck if she goes in too deep. But with Lillia, she can chase because she can safely go back with her grant stacks. For example, LeBlanc can just dash back to her original position and trick you into going the wrong way, but Lillia will still have the move speed to turn around and catch her. I'd also like to add that Lillia can slow high mobility champs like Hecarim and Singed with Rylai's, although I think Hecarim is a far better matchup for Gwen to deal with, as Hecarim can block the Lillia ult with his own ult because his own ult makes him unstoppable. Lillia is a far better user of heal cut, and as such, if you see the enemy team draft healers like Soraka or champs who rely on lifesteal, I would go Lillia instead of Gwen to provide heal cut utility for your team. Gwen relies on damage, and Morella Nomicon is just not a good item on her, and Lillia, her passive, burns people and she builds Leandri, so heal cut is one of the best items on Lillia. So in my opinion, Lillia is one of the greatest compliments to Gwen in the champ pool because Lillia just counters Gwen's hardest matchups. Picks such as Jax, Nasus, Fiora, and Tryndamere, Gwen can struggle phenomenally with. It's a little bit ridiculous how many champs counter Gwen in the game. Like, it's not very fun first picking and blind picking Gwen, and then the enemy team's response is a Jax or a Tryndamere. It's kind of ridiculous, but you know, you're the jungler. If you get ahead and you snowball your other lanes, you can deal with these champs as Gwen, and you provide the opportunity for your top laner to counterpick their supposed counterpick because you can play like mind games if you draft Gwen first, right? But as I was saying, Lillia is really good into Nasus and Tryndamere because they have slows, and Lillia doesn't really care about slows, especially if you build Swiftness boots on her. She can just prance around them, build Rylai's, and they will never be able to catch up to her, so that's why she is really good into Nasus and Tryndamere. And if Tryndamere tries to ult and run away, like an annoying little coward, Lillia can just ult him, and he is like 1 HP, he stops, you catch up, you kill him. Gwen can't do that. If he decides to disengage, she can't really catch up to him. He just dashes and dashes away. So yeah, Tryndamere, an awful matchup for Gwen, but a fun, easy kill for Lillia. And since Lillia doesn't auto-attack much, she can still damage with her Qs against Jax, in addition to putting them asleep so they can't run away. Jax can also hop away with his wards, and you can space him out and flash if he flashes on top of you with his stun. And he's just a really, really easy matchup for Lillia, but of course with Gwen, he denies auto attacks, and if she gets stunned, she's a little bit squishy. He just one shots her, so I try not to play Gwen into Jax. And if I want to play Gwen that day, I either ban Jax or Tryndamere. They kind of have a high play rate, and especially Nasus right now because of the whole ADC meta thing going on, right? So yeah, it's a bit hard playing Gwen jungle right now. As for Fiora, I mean, a good Fiora will kill a Lillia because she can parry the Lillia ult, but if you're a good Lillia, Fiora is just easy bulldozing material for you because you can just Q her, walk away, wait out her parry, although sometimes Fioras are really bad, especially if you're in lower elo, they can't really predict the Lillia ult parry and they miss it, so you generally will sleep them and kill them. So yeah, I would just pick Lillia into a Fiora because Fiora, she can parry Gwen's Q and her R3. It's very predictable and easier to block than Lillia ult. Lastly, I would pick Lillia if your team has no CC, since Gwen doesn't offer any hard, reliable CC or engage. Lillia at least has it on her ult, and she can engage with her flash. I would play these games very carefully as your ult has a longer cooldown than a basic CC ability, and if your team drafted full squishy AP or ADC team, go Lillia, build tank, and hope for the best. So let's talk about how Gwen complements Lillia. Gwen is extremely good into champs with walls and cages, whereas Lillia will just get stuck inside since she doesn't have a dash that can go through walls. I would pick Gwen into a Talia, Yorick, Jarvan, Anivia, and Azir, and save my E to hop over their cages and walls. If your E is on cooldown, you can also press W to buy you time and safely stay inside the cage. If you got pushed by Azir and your E is on cooldown, you may die, so be sure to save your E to either dodge his ult or get back over his wall of soldiers. Vhagar Cage you can't dash over, but you can use your W as a spell shield to walk safely over it and catch up to him and kill him. Lillia struggles into these champs who can get on top of her, but Gwen can duel these champs and kill them with ease if they decide to get on top of her. And this is especially true if she's even or ahead of them, and she'll generally outscale these champs that I listed here. So, if you're playing into Zenzawa's Lillia, it's pretty awful because he can mess up your W sweet spot, and he can get on top of you with his long pointy ability where he marks someone and then he dashes on top of them. That's not fun for Lillia. I forgot to put Diana here, but Diana is another one that counters Lillia because she can also get on top of Lillia, and if she gets on top of Gwen, and Gwen is even with her, and they both have Nashers, Gwen will generally kill the Diana. She just has more damage on her kit. And Jarvan, if Jarvan cages Lillia, Lilia's dead, or if he like uses his little flagpole and hops to her and she can't get away, she's dead. But if Jarvan does that to Gwen, she can duel him. So I like to pick Gwen into these champs. Anyways, thanks so much if you guys made it this far and listened to my rantings and explanations. I truly hope you learned something out of this video, and I hope I have converted Lillia players into Gwen players and Gwen players into Lillia players, or at the very least introduced junglers to their new AP champs. I actually really enjoyed making this video. Guides are super fun to make because I can explain my thought process and build good habits in my gameplay. So if you guys are interested in more Lillia and Gwen guides, I'll be happy to deliver more in the future as the meta shifts and changes. But for now, this is the definitive 2-trick Season 14 guide, and I hope it will help you in the incoming split for the rest of the year. If you enjoyed the video, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I hope to see you in my future videos.